Hello and welcome again to another episode of Swish Money Live. I'm Jeff Welpley, your host today, and I am very lucky to have the world famous Joe Eames. Say hi, Joe.
Hey, Jeff.
Joe and I know each other from a long time back. Joe is very well known in the JavaScript and developer community. I have him on today to talk about a journey that he's had that I think will be of interest to a lot of people watching in terms of moving from different types of jobs working for the man and kind of taking things on himself over time to the point where he has many different balls that he is juggling and exciting future ahead. And I think it's a journey that a lot of people dream about and want to. And I'm sure you have war stories that we'll get into and scars and good and bad, and we'll dive into it all. But let's start off just giving, if you want to give us kind of a general quick introduction to yourself and who you are.
Okay. So my name, as Jeff said, I'm Joe Eames. I was a developer. I mean, I still consider myself to be a developer, but I was a developer for a lot of years. I live in Utah. Since the last 5 years, I was always very interested in education, so I've gotten more and more into education. Over the last 5 years, I've basically made myself into a full-time educator. Probably the primary activity that I've done over the last 5 years has been producing courses for pluralsight.com. They happen to be a local company, but they're a very well-known, widespread company that does developer training. So I've been producing a lot of courses and content for Pluralsight has been my main activity. And then I got into organizing conferences shortly after I started doing Pluralsight courses, and kind of took that in its own direction. So I do a lot of conferences. I organize the biggest Angular conference in the world. I'm been starting up new conferences all the time. Some of them have gone well, some of them haven't. I'm about to start up take over and organize another really big conference, but it hasn't been made public that this is happening, so I don't want to announce it here. But another conference that I've actually been working on for 5 years. So that's primarily what I do, and then I do some workshop training as well now and then. So that's me.
Very cool. And we're going to talk about a lot of those areas, but I want to actually start a little bit from the beginning, because you didn't always do a lot of this stuff that you went over. You were at one point working 9 to 5, bigger companies. And I'm interested, first of all, in knowing about that transition of when I think it was Domo was the last one, right? Like when you made that transition from working the 9 to 5 job to like going out on your own. What was that like? Was it like a one like quick kind of transition, or was it something that slowly evolved over time?
No, that one definitely slowly evolved over time. So I had tried a couple of side businesses before so I started in something like 2012. I went completely independent, but probably as early as 2001 or so, I had done a couple of side businesses with a friend I was a programmer, so I built the software side of a business and had other people that did the other side of the businesses. We did 2 or 3 small efforts that didn't go anywhere. And then in maybe 2009, I think, I started talking with Pluralsight about doing some authoring for them. And I didn't think it was going to pay very much money, but I was very interested in what it was. So I started doing some content for them, and I did content for them for like 3 years while I was working full time, 2.5, something like that. And eventually the content that I had done on the side started paying me in royalties enough that I felt safe enough to leave my job. So I remember it right at the end of that, I was working at this company that was one of those, it was a local Utah company, but they were trying very much to be your standard Silicon Valley type company, free lunches, pool tables, that sort of thing. They were in kind of a startup mode. They'd raised a bunch of money. They were spending it at least as fast as they were raising it.
That's the most type of company to work for.
Yep, yep. So it was fun. It was a fun place to work at. I worked with a lot of cool people. It was a very cool environment, and they were we had stock options, and they were promising us that we were all going to be multimillionaires once the company went public. And so all of this promise of the future had kind of held me back from going full time to do courses for Pluralsight. And I remember I was talking with a friend, and he said, you're giving up on a lot of money, doubling your income maybe, because of a free lunch every day. And I thought about it, and I said, you're right. And so I went in, within a couple of weeks, I'd quit. I was doing my own thing full time at that time.
Yeah, it is funny, the power of the free lunch and how it holds you back. But also even the stock options thing. I mean, that's like another interesting aspect trust me, like I work for a startup, so like I understand I sell people on stock options, but as far as trying to bring new employees in. But
right.
The reality is that it's like gambling. You shouldn't be depending your livelihood on stock options working out. It's one of these things that you need to position it so that if they work out, that's great. If not, you're not going to lose your shirt or suffer too much.
Right. Yeah, I had somebody give me a piece of advice once that I don't know that I necessarily took it to heart, although nowadays I definitely have taken it more to heart. And that was, whenever you take a job, you should always value your stock options at zero and make sure everything works out outside of the stock options, and consider the stock options to be a great maybe in the long-term future. You have zero control over your stock options. Due to various number of reasons, your company could do very well and your stock options could still be worth nothing to you. So never, ever value the stock options and make that a critical component to considering. If you have two companies and one offers stock option and one doesn't, that shouldn't be a factor in deciding what kind of an offer to take. So that's something I've definitely seen more and more as I've gotten more and more experience and seen companies that have offered stock options and how that's turned out.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree. And the team is much more important anyways, like who you're working with and that type of thing.
Right.
One other thing you mentioned about slowly starting up, that you were starting to do courses on the side. I think that's important because a lot of people think that if they were to start doing it's one or the other, that either they're working a 9-to-5 job or they're doing something on their own. In reality, there are all these opportunities for doing these small things on the side. Did you see, other than like doing the courses thing, which I think, by the way, you don't have to be technical for that. There's plenty of courses out there in many different subjects, most likely something that
Right.
Was there other stuff that you saw that in terms of opportunities of doing kind of like those small pieces of work on the side?
Right. I've seen a few, and I engage in a lot of them myself. So for me personally, in addition to doing content, courses, which have there's a great aspect in them, because once you produce a piece of content, theoretically that content could provide value forever. Now, in the land of technology, things get old fast, so that's not quite as true. But I happen to have a friend whose cousin does YouTube videos, and all he does is these little how-to videos, and he does them in his spare time, and they're all kinds of silly things, and no single one has made him tons of money. But over time, he's built up so many of them, and they all produce a little bit of money through YouTube, that he's actually making a reasonable amount of money, enough I think he's paying his house payment, right? And it just comes in now. It's like, there's very few things where the potential reward could be, unlimited. And content is one of those things. So I really liked content for that aspect. But it's also very, like, I organize conferences. It's very possible to organize conferences in your spare time. You're going to need, at least with this particular thing, conferences, you do need some time during the day, but you can, even with a somewhat inflexible job, you can make those arrangements, taking longer lunches now and then, or just doing it just during your lunchtime, and then taking a day off now and then to do the actual things that require it. So that's another thing that can be done. On my first conference, I had 4 partners. Of those 4 partners, I was the only one who ultimately went full-time for myself. The other 4 stayed full-time at their jobs until I think the last year. All but one of them, or all but 2 of them, have gone off and done their own things, utilizing the money that we've made through conferences as a way to springboard into what they were more passionate about. But yeah, there was definitely those 2. But one of the things I would say is, rather than looking at just content or just conferences, is I was passionate about technology and education. So because I was passionate about that, I read all kinds of things and I was exposed to all kinds of things, and I started seeing the opportunities in those areas. So whatever it is that you're passionate about, the more that you spend time in there, the more you're going to be able to see. Now, one thing I think to always be aware of, every time I talk to some kid in school that's learning a program and I say, "Oh, what are you going to do?" And they say, "Oh, I'm going to do game development." Well, it's great that you're passionate about game development, but I know a lot of people who are passionate about board games, and they make board games and they produce board games, because I'm very passionate about board games, but they don't make any money doing that. So there are things that make money and there are things that don't make much money. So whatever you're passionate about, try to find the most lucrative form of that. I'm passionate about education, but I would make very little money if I decided I wanted to go be an elementary school teacher. Right? I'd have to go to school for 6 years, and then I would make very little money. So I tried to, because I'm in that realm, I'm looking at what are the ways to merge my passions into things that actually produce reasonable, on the higher end of producing money in that realm.
Yeah, a really great point. Actually, two points I want to add. So one for the content thing. Yeah, it's amazing that certain piece of content actually increase in value over time, especially on the YouTube thing, as long as it's not dated information. Because once on those platforms, especially YouTube, as you get more views and more subscribes, it gets amplified even more so. So like that's actually a really great point. I mean, it takes time to build up like some of that stuff, but it can snowball like over time. And the other thing that's super interesting is the idea of whatever you're doing kind of like becoming an expert, or like there's a certain amount to being seen as, and kind of like thinking of yourself as the sort of like expert in a field, which opens up other doors. Once you kind of like just go down that route of like you're interacting with other people who are doing it, then stuff that you haven't even thought of, like kind of like gets proposed, like, hey, why don't you do this with us or whatever else?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
There's
yeah,
definitely a lot of synergies going on.
Definitely interesting. I wanted to actually in particular about conferences, but really quick before we do that, I did forget to mention that if anybody watching does have a question for Joe, you can post that right in the YouTube channel, or on the YouTube page. There's a comment section, and you can post him a question, and then I'll see whether Joe can answer it. Don't try to embarrass him too much. And also, if you aren't already a subscriber to our channel, definitely become a subscriber. We have shows like this on a semi-regular basis, so definitely join us. So for conferences, Joe, I know that this is one of these things that, again, snowballed. You started off with one, and now you're doing many different ones. Mm-hmm. With any of these types of efforts, and I know for conferences in particular, there's like ups and downs. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about maybe some of the things where it was either a mistake was made, or there was like basically something that didn't go according to plan, but you've kind of learned from it and kind of grew from there, because that is a normal part of the process of trying these things out.
Right. Yeah, the conference space has been super interesting, and we've had all kinds of ups and downs. So our first conference that we did, that I did, was super successful, wildly successful. I was very lucky. It was my first basically swing at bat. I had been helping out with a small community conference, just volunteering my time before that. So I'd had some minor exposure to the space, but never really taken charge and tried to run one myself. So my first swing was actually a huge home run, right? It was very profitable. We did a great job, got a lot of attendees, and had a high demand for it. So it was actually, in that case, that was actually a bad thing, because I hadn't learned any of the hard learned lessons that you can learn as you get into something and it's hard, right? It was actually very easy. Certainly, there was a lot of hard work, but the success just came without a lot of delicate effort on our part, a lot of wisdom or experience on our part. So when I went off to do the second conference, it was actually the exact opposite. I picked a market that wasn't nearly as in high demand. We had a hard time selling tickets. We ended up our first year, we were going to lose $100,000 on that conference, right? It was going to be crazy. Like we were all worried we are going to lose our houses and stuff like that, or that we were going to have to bankrupt the company, and the people involved were going to really hurt their reputation because we had already taken a lot of money and we wouldn't be able to pay it all back. So we ended up scrambling, and we actually threw together a second conference in the same space that was back in the higher demand area. And so those two conferences together were able to pull in enough that we actually made a small, tidy little profit. And so that was my first exposure to, wow, this isn't just falling off a log. Like this isn't some space where nobody else has just figured it out. And, there's a ton of conferences out there. There's a lot of competition out there. There's a lot of people who do conferences full time and they're experts in it. And I was competing with those people. So that was definitely something that I learned was it's actually good to start a little bit slow and grow and have some problems, because you get the wisdom so that as you get bigger, you're making the right decisions and you know when to risk a little bit more and when to be a little bit more conservative. And you have your own personal boundaries as to how risky you want to be. With every conference, it's just like any other business. If I am more risky and make it be a little bit more ambitious, I might make more profit, but on the opposite side, if things don't go well, I lose more money. So I have to gauge my own internal boundaries as to how risky I'm going to be, how much I'm willing to risk on a conference if it doesn't go well as I start up new ones. So those hard-earned lessons of having some problems in the front, those were definitely something that you need to have. If you do something and you're wildly successful at it right at first, you should really be questioning yourself, because you probably haven't seen the hard stuff and you're likely to set yourself up for a huge fall. In fact, we had I won't mention any names, but a close conference that I wasn't involved in. They had the same experience where they decided to start up a new conference, were way too aggressive in how they did things. And they were looking at a $250,000 loss. They were able to end up fixing things and renegotiating. They actually took a small loss of 20,000 or something. And the people involved had to cover it out of their own pockets. And hopefully they'll be able to recover from it. And maybe in future years, they'll have the conference again and they'll make some of their money back. But with all things, the hard-earned lessons, those mistakes that you make, they are well worth it in the future, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely scary, but at the same time, there's an underlying lesson there about how, with any of these ventures, or like when you're trying to do things on your own and trying out all these kind of different things, whether it's content or conferences or any other idea, there are people that have done it before. I mean, now you're a veteran,
right?
And I've actually pinged you before for this type of thing, getting advice. But the point is that whatever you try to think, like there's somebody out there that's done it, and there's value to finding ways to get mentors, get people to help you, give advice. Like one hack that I've tried to do, maybe varying degrees of success, is for anytime you're doing something new, to kind of like partner with, bring somebody in who has done it before. There's like a lot of stuff that even if you were to just ask them for advice, that wouldn't be the same as like going through the experience with you. There's just like so much knowledge ingrained in you, like once you've kind of like done a couple rounds, that is extremely helpful.
Right. So there's a conference that's here in town, and they wanted to start off. They were in a different space. They came to me and said, "Hey, you got a lot of experience. Would you come and kind of help us get started?" And we just negotiated a small deal. I think they offered to pay me 10% of their profits for year one. And I just was able to act as a mentor. I didn't have to do too much work, but I brought in the wisdom and experience. And then that was it. It was a small short-term deal. And then from then on, they were able to run on their own. Not only did I give them comfort, but whatever experience that I had of telling them, "Oh, don't do this, do this." And, a lot of help that really help them get started. And I would highly recommend that sort of thing. Find somebody. There's plenty of free mentoring opportunities around in entrepreneurial circles, but if you need somebody that has specific experience in an area that you're at, you can always potentially work out some kind of a deal for them if they're not going to do it for free, at least. And that's, you might, again, you look at those costs and think, oh, that's a lot of money. I could save, a bunch of money, but man, the mistakes. Again, this other conference, if they had come to me and said, hey, come on as a partner, then I could have steered them away from, they would never have been in a position where they were going to lose $250,000. Right.
Right. Yeah. Actually, one other hack I was just thinking of with this is, because there's a leveling up over time. Like we're talking about, as you get more experience, like now you're getting people to pay you essentially strategy money, and you don't have to do as much work and you still get, money off of it. But if you kind of like go the reverse direction back when you started, one hack that I think I've seen other people do that's useful is that if you want to eventually be Joe Eames, like you aspire to be Joe Eames, which is like most of us do, it can be helpful to be okay with like starting at the lower rung and like, okay, you are just going to be the administrative assistant. Yes. Or just something to be there and be involved, be learning, and then kind of grow from there. And so I don't think you as an entrepreneur or, contractor or, going out on your own, you shouldn't be worried that you're starting off with kind of setting your sights low, because you can build off of that and kind of grow from there.
Right. For sure.
Cool. So now that you have a number of things, you have a couple different things going on. In addition, like there's other stuff that we haven't talked about too, that we don't have to get into, but you have other ventures that you're starting now. You're kind of very, a lot of different things coming in. How do you prioritize what you're going to do? Because then you have like a whole different class of problems of once you start to get these opportunities, like you end up getting to a point where it's more of a risk of drowning than starving. So how do you properly prioritize and organize? Do you have like a framework for that, or do you just kind of like play it by ear?
I wouldn't say that I have a framework for it. This is probably or definitely an area where I struggle in as well. One of the things, again, another saying that I've heard that for me is very important is the magic is in what you say no to, right? So it's not, is going to be certain points where you need something to do. And so you're going to say yes to anything that comes along because, even if it's free and even if you don't necessarily want to do it, it takes you in the direction that you want to go. Whether that's being the administrative assistant, being an intern, and if you decide, all right, I want to do this thing, no matter what it takes to get there, if I'm going to have to pay somebody to teach me or go work for free for a while, whatever it is, you say yes to everything. But pretty quick, opportunities start coming in and you find ways that I could spend time doing this, and this. And so I could, I've got 40 hours worth of work to do every day, and I only have 10 or so hours to do them in, depending on the day. So the magic is in saying no, for sure. So that's one reality I have to constantly face, and I'm struggling. I certainly struggle with that. Like, business is growing, we're moving in lots of different directions, and I'm doing more and more conferences. I've got more content that I have to put out as well. I could do more workshops, and then there's companies that I can be more involved in as well that want expertise along these lines. So how do I prioritize that sort of stuff? So one of the things that I did with Pluralsight, for example, was I realized that I was playing in their sandbox. I was producing content for them, and it's their sandbox. At any point, they could come to me and say, we're not interested in any more courses. And I know people who have had this experience where we just don't want you to produce any more courses for us. Or they might collapse as a company. There's a lot of different things that I don't have control over. So even though I could have spent the maximum amount of time that I could producing courses, which would have been the most valuable use of my time at the time, I personally decided I wanted to look to the future. And so I spent some of my time trying to build other revenue streams at the same time so that I had some diversification. We could argue the wisdom of that. Um, at some point, the Pluralsight ride is going to be over for me, and I'm going to have to do other things. So at that point, if I have focused on them, I would have maximized my return from them, but I would have minimized my ability to react and survive when they went away. So I decided I was going to spend something like 60% of my time doing that, and I just split off 40% was going to be doing other things. And then I just time boxed myself. I only got 40%. So the tasks that I can do, as they require more and I have to do a little extra this day, then I'm starting to say no to other things that are coming along down in the future. But so me personally, it was about time boxing. And then it was saying, if an opportunity comes along that I could say yes to, if I'm not taking care of my current opportunities, well, right now I either have to give up an opportunity or I have to say no to the future opportunity. If the future opportunity seems great, I have to pick opportunities right now that I'm going to turn around and just say no to. So those were kind of my two strategies. Now I'm in a position where I have enough recurring income coming in and enough opportunities that taking that step where I need more people to help out and I have to delegate more. And as you delegate, the quality goes down. Just no doubt about it. Whether or not the quality is going down from an objective level, certainly they're not doing it the way that I would do things. So that's the next fight is I'm turning more and more things over to other people. So right now, about a year ago, I hired a personal assistant. And this person comes over and they do all the sorts of things, as many things as I can get them to do that just a responsible adult can do. Like go to my mom's house and pick up a check for this thing, right? And run this errand, go to the store and pick up this thing that I need to buy. And so I'm delegating all these things out and they take more time. And sometimes I'm waiting around and that's a problem. So, but learning to live with the fact that things aren't getting done as well so that you could do more things, that's fine. So long as that's not important. Like I can't delegate out my content because that has to be my stuff and it has to be a high level of quality. So I kind of talked around a lot of stuff and never really gave a really solid answer to how I do it. I mean, it's a hard balance.
I mean, part of what you're touching on is the 4-hour work week type thing of, looking to push to others what you can. And there's always that balance, like you're saying, that sometimes it's not everything because there's certain things that won't work as well. So you have to gauge that. But generally speaking, if you get in that mindset of delegating and pushing things to others, you generally will over time become more efficient. There might be some things you have to work out process-wise and that type of thing. But it definitely helps. And especially when you're at the point where you're leaving money on the table because there's so much opportunity, it's usually worth your while to start exploring doing that, if not before then.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Any business as it grows needs to grow at some point, and that growth is going to have some costs.
Agreed. Well, Joe, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. It has been very informative chat. Just enjoyable as always talking to you. Before we go to picks, I want to remind everybody again, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Definitely check out Joe's Pluralsight courses. Go to NGConf is one of the big conference that he does, but he does a bunch of other ones in Salt Lake City and around the world. So definitely check that out. But Joe, let's go to you for picks.
All right. So I've got two picks. I'm a big fan of board games. I love spending time playing board games. I find it to be very relaxing, and being married, my wife likes them enough. It's a great way for us to spend time together. So I recently played a board game that I absolutely love, had a ton of fun in it. It's got some strategy, but it's also somewhat appealing to people who aren't huge on strategy games as well. It's called Azul, Azul, which is Spanish for blue. It's a tile game that has a very unique mechanic to it. Really fun game. You can pick it up off Amazon. So that'll be my first pick. And then my second pick is going to be a conference that I'm putting together, going to be in October. the second and third up in beautiful Park City, Utah, which is like this crazy, amazing resort town. And in the fall with the leaf colors, it's just going to be amazing. It's called the Framework Summit. It's all about all JavaScript front-end frameworks together: React, Angular, Ember, Vue, Elm, Backbone, Knockout, everything. Focused on all of those. And we've got representatives from all the major frameworks coming to talk about their frameworks. And the CFP hasn't yet been open, but we've got an amazing we've already got quite a few great lined up speakers and a great organizing committee, very diverse, large number of people. So I'm super excited about this one. This is going to be, it's something I've been working on for a couple of years now to put together. So very excited for that. It's called the Framework Summit. You can just Google that and you'll find it, or go to frameworksummit.com. There we go. That's it.
I think I helped you recruit your first speaker yesterday for the conference.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Joe. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for joining today. We'll be back again tomorrow. So have a good one. See ya.